káwa tó ṣeré o ká má tí ì ṣe gbàgbà.
Ìgbà ló yẹ ká kọjú káwa tó ṣeré o ká mọ̀ tí í ṣe bàbá o.
Ìbà ló yẹ ká kọjú káwa tó ṣeré o ká má tí ì ṣe gbàgbà.
Ìgbà ló yẹ ká kọjú káwa tó ṣeré o ká mọ̀ tí í ṣe bàbá o.
Ìbà ló yẹ ká kọjú káwa tó ṣeré o ká má tí ì ṣe gbàgbà.
Ìgbà ló yẹ ká kọjú káwa tó ṣeré o ká mọ̀ tí í ṣe bàbá o.
Olódùmarè
Ìbà ni mo ṣe,
Ifá
ìbà ni mo ṣe,
ẹlẹ́gbára
ìbà ni mo ṣe,
láàlú
ìbà ni mo ṣe,
òrìṣà ńlá
ìbà ni mo ṣe,
olúkòso
ìbà ni mo ṣe.
ọ̀sán yìí o.
We're going to talk about today what's known as the Big Dry. The Big Dry was an ecological weather crisis, a change in weather pattern that affected West Africa from 4th century BC to the 3rd century AD. Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge and recommend a book called The Yoruba, A New History from Akinwumi Ogundiran. This is where the majority of this information comes from. The Big Dry had social, economic, and ritual impacts in which we had to change and adopt a reality as Yoruba people. It also accelerated the end of the prior culture before the Yoruba, which is known as the Nok. Because of the Big Dry and rainfall being shortened to 3 months, the significant change known as iron production came into play. The earliest evidence for this is around the Ife Ijumu area, which is middle Nigeria. But this soon spread throughout all of Nigeria to become the standard. This also propelled our men to become farmers and hunters with these new tools from the Iron Age. The iron bloom became like gold, especially in the southwestern confluence where the Yoruba people reside. This new technology had a distinct male-centered character, and mythology and ritual started to come arise because of this. Now, I know you heard me say that men predominantly took over these practices. This is probably why today the deity known as Ogun is not only seen as a male deity, but his functions and actions are centered around male counterparts. The persuasiveness of this iron technology gave birth to, you can say, a new type of man in the Yoruba society. The adoption of iron tools enhanced the role of males in agriculture with the machete. We had to clear the thickens, and we had to trim with the hose. The large heaps, the broad blade iron hoes, and long iron machetes were essential tools in agriculture. Men became like arrowheads of migration as well, because to move to new territories, you need these iron tools to not only discover, but to make them suitable. In the area of this climatic change, innovation and social organization was at an all-time high, because just as a new man had been born, a new woman had been born as well. Women now became more caretakers of the house. The young wife was incorporated into the household of her male partner, as a junior member in most instances. The practice of Iyawo had been born. Iyawo means wife in Yoruba society, but the practice of polygamy became more prevalent. So households, compounds, normal everyday life of man and woman was affected all by this climatic weather change. Between 100 AD and 250 AD, the Proto Yorùbá migrants birthed a new daughter language on the eastern side of the river Niger. This was the ancestor of the contemporary Igala speech community. So around 250, another wave of Proto Yorùbá migrants had reached the land's ends and settled on the Atlantic coast. These were the ancestors of the Itishe Kiri people. All of this migration from different groups were in reaction to the ecological crisis. There's linguistic evidence that indicates by 250 AD, more Proto-Yoruba had branched into three daughter languages known as the Proto-Igala in the southeast of the confluence, the Proto-Iteskiri, which we just talked about, which came out of the river Ose and the Atlantic, and the Proto-Yoruba in the southwestern confluence, the third, and was the most influential in that it gave birth to all the contemporary Yoruba language subgroups and dialects. All of these migrations came in waves, larger waves, and they spread throughout southwestern Nigeria in the hills and the slopes and the valleys, what we now know as Ekiti and Igbomina areas. And the third group radiated throughout southward, known as Akoko, Owo, and Ondon, Ilaje. Towards the end of the Big Dry, the southward momentum of migration intensified in often overlapping directions. As these agricultural families and households and communities branched off from one another and became relatively isolated in farming villages between the years 250 and 600 AD, they spun off in severely and in several mutually intelligible dialects that laid foundations for the present-day language that you hear today amongst Yoruba people. Now, ask yourself, all this culture, all this migration, iron implications, deities arose, mythology, people became communities, new men, new women, all simply because it stopped raining.